let's bring in our guest, Jimmy Boyd. And now I'd like to welcome a very well-known and decorated handicapper in the industry. Jimmy is 161 and 123 in his last 284 top plays. You can get some of his free picks at boydsbets.com. You can follow Jimmy on Twitter at boydsbets. I'd like to welcome Jimmy Boyd to the Oddsbreakers podcast. How you doing, man?
Hey, thanks a lot for having me on. I'm glad to be here.
We're happy to have you, man. It's always great to have new perspectives here, and I've been following your website for a very long time here, and I'm glad I finally was able to get you on here. Why don't you quick introduce yourself to the listeners? Tell them a little bit about your handicapping and sports betting history.
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, my name is Jimmy Boyd. I run the handicapping site over at boydsbets.com. It's where I post a lot of my personal stuff. I'm also a co-owner over at sportscapping.com, where we track, monitor, and sell picks from a variety of different handicappers. I got in the handicapping business back in the fall of 2002, so at this point, I've been around for a long time. Seems like yesterday I was just the industry rookie, if you will, but now I'm an aged veteran. So, growing up, I was just always interested in sports, and not just watching them, but also like the stats and things like that, kind of the numbers behind why things were going the way they were. I'd keep stats of our, recess basketball games, right? Tell everybody what their field goal percentage was. So I'm kind of the stat geek kind of guy. I'm not necessarily a matchup analysis. I couldn't tell you every player on every team in college basketball by any means. But what I do is more just put together a model of numbers. So I throw in the key stats, and it kind of spits me out how much a team should be favored by, and I use more of that. And once I get that, I look into the game, right, to make sure nobody's hurt, injured, and make sure the matchup fits kind of what it needs to be. So, I've been very fortunate. My background in statistics and computer programming have helped turn me into an advantaged sports bettor. Absolutely,
man. Yeah, it's always nice to have little systems there, number systems. You're a numbers guy, it seems, and that's why you're still in the business. You definitely do it right. So I love that, and I also love your article on boydsbets.com covering college basketball key numbers. It looks like looking at 3 is the biggest key number of them all. Can you talk a little bit about that article?
Yeah, sure. So I put this together, a few years ago. I was thinking we had this college football key numbers, the NFL key numbers, right? And everybody knows about 3 and 7 and to a lesser extent 4 and 10 and how important they are. I was just like, is there anything in basketball, right? And there's not the same kind of scoring system where it just goes by 3 and 7s to lead you to believe that there would be. But when I got digging into the numbers, I really found that 1 and 2 are less common. That's for sure. And I think that's just kind of how the end game plays out, right? If a team's up by 1, they get the ball with little time left. The other team fouls, kind of pushes it up a little bit. Last second shots and things like that kind of stick out in people's mind. There's a little bit of cognitive bias there, but it doesn't happen all that often. So you get these margins of 1 and 2 happen around 3.5% of the time. And then from about 3 to 10, you're looking at closer to 4.5% on average. Some of them land more often than others. And 3 seems to be the biggest key. In the last 10 years or so of college basketball, that's landed on there about 5.5% of the time. And
that's when the spread was 3, or is that just all games?
Yeah, so that's when I look at it when the spread's 3, right? So if the spread's 15, it's not going to land on 3 very often. Just how the scores distribute, it's going to be. I like to use the spread as where I'm looking at the margin of victory, mainly because that should be the meatiest part of your distribution curve. So when the spread's 3, the game lands on 3, 5.5% of the time. If that makes sense.
Well, that's awesome information, man. So it seems like 3 is kind of a key number there, and then you said that I think 2 is second, and then you have 5, but 1 is surprisingly uncommon. And I'm looking at this article; it's kind of buried there, so that's interesting. So yeah, I mean, looking at a lot of situations, yeah, the following probably really takes that 1 out of contention, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and it does take 2 out too. 2's not as common as 3 either. So, 3 is the most common at about 5.5%. Then you kind of hover around 4 as you get up to 10, and from 10 on, the games there's not as big of a sample size, so you'll get some outliers where like 15, it lands there 5.5% of the time, but that's only happened 24 times in the last 10 years, right? So just 1 or 2 times that doesn't happen, and that percentage would drop quite a bit. So I kind of round it out a little bit just to average it out, and from 3 to 10, have it being 4%. I'm really confident in that number. It's like 4.3%. So
perfect. So is it worth it to buy off of the 3 so you're not pushing all these games?
Yeah, so the numbers on that would say that if it lands there 5.5% of the time, that if you buy off of 3, so like if you're taking an underdog that's +3 and you're buying it to +3.5, and you got to pay 10 cents a juice, you're giving up. You have to win about 2.4% of your games to make that worth it. And if it lands on 3 5.5% of the time, you're actually picking up 2.8% of percentage point value. So there's a little bit of an edge if you can get 10 cents on or off of a 3. It's not something that I would recommend you just blindly do, right? Like I wouldn't say, hey, the line's 3 tonight. Take the favorite -2.5, -120, and the underdog at +3.5, -120. You still wouldn't make money doing that blindly. But if you like a team that's -3 or +3 and you bought it off there, I think you're giving yourself just a little bit more of an edge. And for the recreational bettor, I mean, they like to win, right? They like to take favorites. And,
sure.
And they'd rather win 53% of the time and get $100, and that 47% of the time when they lose, pay $120, and they'd be better off than just winning and losing 50% of the time and paying $110 when you lose and picking up $100 when they win. So it's one of those things where it doesn't hurt you. Like I think everybody just blindly thinks, oh, you're buying a half a point, you're an idiot. But the numbers actually say that you're not. So it's something to look at.
That's great information, and in not necessarily just buying off the 3. If you're using multiple sports books to place your bets, you can wait out on one of them to possibly move that in your direction. I think that's another important part of this discussion. It's not just buying off the 3; it's shopping that 3. So I found that absolutely fascinating when it comes to your article there. So excellent information there, and hopefully people will take some of that advice. Think about the 3s, and the 5 looks like the third most common number too, and not necessarily, but not buying off 5, but possibly shopping that 5 and seeing if you can find some better lines there, my man. Well, cool. Let's move into, and I'm not sure if you get into future betting. We look at some of them. There's an absolute rip-offs on some of these lines here. Obviously, everyone that took Duke at +175 to win it all is probably licking their wounds a little bit. That thing went up after Zion's injury, but at the same time, they weren't even undefeated. They lost 2 games. They lost at home to Syracuse. They're a terrible 3-point shooting team, and Vegas is sitting there selling this at +175. Is there any futures out there that you like that you might be able to make some money off of if they hit the tournament, maybe hit the other side?
Yeah, I was looking at that. I saw a couple places still had them around +200 today. And I mean, they're essentially saying that they have a 33% chance of winning it all at that kind of number. And, I find it hard to believe that any team with today's college basketball parity has that good of a chance coming in there. So they're definitely feeding off of that Zion hype and taking advantage of the guys who, watch too much ESPN and think he's the next coming of LeBron James or something, and he's already that good. So I personally don't do a lot of futures wagering just because of the hold from the book on that. But I did take a look at some teams that were kind of undervalued in my mind, and Kansas kind of stood out. You can get Kansas at over 20-1. The reason I like them is that they had kind of a slow stretch. They're missing some big key players, but they've had a very tough schedule. Between them and Purdue, I really liked their schedule that they played so far. They've kind of gone through the gauntlet, and they've come out a better team for it. And I think that they might have some value once they get in the tournament. Anything can happen. Virginia was another team. They're really good. I know last year you go there and you lose in the first round, right, to a 16, and there's a stigma against you where all of a sudden Tony Bennett can't coach. This team can't get it done when it comes to the tournament and all that. And I don't think that's true at all. I think that just, any given day, one of these teams can beat another. And they are very strong, and, they might show some value at 10-1. But those are kind of the 3 that I looked at that had the biggest opportunities in my mind. How about you?
No, it's great. Virginia for sure. I mean, defense, and they're coming in knowing what can happen. They don't ever want to feel that again. I mean, these are the same players. They return players. These aren't these one and dones there. So that's the angle there. I don't know if there's a lot of people that like the angle, unfortunately, and that's why the spread's not bigger than 9.5, 10-1 on Virginia. But there might still be some value there, or for a money line rollover, possibly on old Virginia.
For sure.
So I sometimes take some of these futures just to make straight money. When these teams get to the tournament, I think you can find Buffalo at 75-1. They're going to be a decent seed, maybe 4, maybe 5 out there. They have a shot at getting to the Sweet 16, and then you might want to start hedging that ticket right there. Another one that I was looking at, you have Iowa. They're 100-1, and I don't see them winning at all, and probably no Final Four. But they definitely have an explosive offense, and when they're hitting those threes, they can be a very dangerous team. Baylor's up there at 100-1, and Baylor was doing great until their injuries, so you might be able to make some money off that ticket. The most interesting one, I think we talked about it in a previous podcast, Utah State. They're 500-1. They could possibly get in an at-large team if they don't win their tournament out there, but it's just Nevada in their way. So, maybe some very, half lunch money or something you can throw on Utah State, something you wouldn't mind kissing away, because you can certainly make some money off that ticket. Florida's 150-1. They just beat LSU. That might be enough to get into the tournament for them. Not a great non-conference schedule, but there's some value on some of those teams if you kind of want to hedge. So, those are the kind of the ones that I was looking at, but definitely not interested, in taking anything like Duke at 2-1, and Tennessee with at 15-1 with their bad defense. That's a tough one too. That's just, those odds are just way overhyped. So
I agree with you on Tennessee. They kind of were taking advantage of a soft schedule early on. I think they're going to kind of be exposed like they were against Kentucky, that they're not quite as good as their number one ranking indicated. So I'm with you on, there's more fade teams in my mind than there are ones that I'd really want to hop on.
Absolutely. And after Tennessee gets done with this gauntlet of schedule here at the very end, you'll probably get them at 25-35-1 come tournament time if you really like them. Better options when the tournament comes out, my man. Awesome. Well, let's get into a few of these games, shall we?
Sounds good.
All right, my man. And we have, I think the first one's on Friday here. We have, I'm just kind of shifting here on the computer. I believe it's Kent State is going to Buffalo here. I believe the spread's going to be pretty high. I think my look ahead was around 16-point spread, 160 total is my look ahead line that I pulled up. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, that's pretty much right on the button of what I had model spit out, somewhere between 15 and 16 points here. And these are two teams that I don't know as well as others. Like I don't think I've played on or against either one of these teams this year, but Buffalo has just basically annihilated their competition in conference. So it's tough for me when you get those bigger spreads to put an accurate number on there. But breaking down this game, Buffalo is going to score. They shoot the ball incredibly well. Kent State, they let their opponents shoot pretty much career highs every time they step on the floor. So
yeah.
There's going to be a lot of points here, especially on the Buffalo side of things. They don't have much size. Kent State doesn't have much size down low, so this will be a game for Nick Perkins to kind of step up. He had 20 points against them in their first matchup. He didn't play much last time out in their blowout win over Ohio, but the game before against Toledo, he went off for 26 points and 10 rebounds. I'm expecting another big game out of him. Mm-hmm. I don't really have a solid feel on which team I would lean towards on covering, but I don't think that we're on upset alert by any means here.
No, and I've been following Buffalo. I was on them last game, minus 18 against Ohio. I thought this was going to be my hardest sweat, and they ended up winning by 47 points, scoring 114. So that was pleasant to see. they almost hit the over themselves in that game. Yeah. Kent State, on the other hand, they're kind of holding their own, 8-5 in the MAC. They won 4 of their last 6 games. The spread's going to be pretty large. It's going to be 16, 17, 18, and I'm not so sure